Hello, hello, and welcome back to Learn the Bible in a Year for January 24th, 2026. And today we're reading through Genesis chapter 47, verses 13 through 31, as well as Genesis chapter 48. We're also reading Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 through 28, and then jumping into the first part of Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 13. And then we are finishing up with Proverbs chapter 3 and verses 1 through 10. A little bit of a mouthful for you to hear for our reading today, but even more of a mouthful for me to say. So I got you on that one. All right, now let's jump right into today's recap. We're picking up in Genesis chapter 47, starting in verse 13. The famine is so severe that there's no food anywhere. Joseph collects all the money in Egypt and Canaan as payment for grain. When the money runs out, Egyptians come saying, "Give us food or we will die." Joseph says, "Bring your livestock." They exchange their horses, sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys for food that gets them through 1 year. But they return again the next year. There is nothing left except our bodies and land. Buy us and our land for food, and we'll be in bondage to Pharaoh. Joseph buys all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh and reduces the people to servitude. The only exception is the priests' land. They receive a regular allotment from Pharaoh. Joseph then gives them seeds and establishes a law that 1/5 of your produce will go to Pharaoh and 4/5 they will keep for themselves. This is in exchange to save their lives. Israel, meanwhile, settles in Goshen, acquires property, and increases greatly. Jacob lives in Egypt 17 years, reaching 147 years old. Knowing death is near, he calls Joseph and asks him to put your hand under my thigh. In ancient Near Eastern culture, this oath gesture was extremely binding. Placing a hand near the reproductive organs symbolized future generations being held to a promise. A little bit gross, but that's what they did. Jacob says, "Don't bury me in Egypt. Carry me out and bury me where my fathers are buried." Joseph swears it, and Israel worships leaning on his staff. All right, Genesis chapter 48 now. Joseph hears that his father is ill and takes his sons Manasseh and Ephraim. Israel rallies his strength and sits up. Jacob tells Joseph that God appeared to him at Bethel and promised descendants and land. "Now your two sons born in Egypt will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine just as Reuben and Simeon are mine." This is huge. Joseph's sons are being adopted as full tribal heads, giving Joseph a double portion of inheritance. This kind of goes back to what we talked about with his coat. This is not a coat of many colors like we've been led to believe by the DreamWorks film. It is actually a second coat, meaning he will have a double inheritance. Well, what do you know? He's having a double inheritance through his children, Ephraim and Manasseh. Anyways, Israel's eyes are failing from old age. He can hardly see. Joseph brings the boys close. Jacob kisses and embraces them, saying, "I never expected to see your face again," meaning Joseph, "and now God let me see your children too." Joseph positions Ephraim on his right towards Israel's left hand and Manasseh on his left towards Israel's right hand. But Israel crosses his arms, putting his right hand on Ephraim the younger and his left on Manasseh. In that culture, the right hand conveyed the greater blessing. He blesses them, asking God to bless these boys. "May they be called by my name and increase greatly." Joseph is displeased seeing his father's right hand on Ephraim. He tries to move it to Manasseh's head, saying, "No, this one's the firstborn," but Israel refuses. "I know, my son, Manasseh will be great, but his younger brother will be greater. His descendants will become a group of nations." He puts Ephraim ahead of Manasseh, kind of in the same way that Jacob was ahead of his older brother Esau. All right, jumping into the New Testament now, we are in Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 through 28, and then also jumping into 17, verses 1 through 13. Jesus begins explaining that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer at the hands of the religious leaders, be killed, and then rise again on the third day. Peter rebukes him. "Never, Lord, shall this ever happen." Jesus turns and says something real nice to Peter. He says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block. You don't have God's concerns in mind, but human concerns." Remember that Peter just proclaimed that Jesus was the Messiah and the Lord blesses him. And then now immediately he rebukes him for having doubts in the plan of God. The only roller coaster that I can think of that's more dramatic than this is when Joseph was a slave, and then one conversation later, he becomes the second most powerful in all of Egypt. Well, Peter just experienced the exact opposite of that. Jesus just exalted him for having it revealed to him that he is the Messiah. What a great thing. Followed immediately by rebuking him and calling him Satan. Gosh, what a roller coaster. All right, moving forward, 6 days later, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a high mountain. There he is transfigured. His face shines like the sun, his clothes become white as light, and Moses and Elijah appear and talk with him. Peter says, Lord, it is good for us to be here. I'll put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he is speaking, a bright cloud covers them, and a voice says, This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him. The disciples fall face down, terrified. Jesus touches them and says, Get up, don't be afraid. When they look up, only Jesus remains. Now, coming down from the mountain, Jesus says, Don't tell anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. The disciples ask, Why do teachers say Elijah must come first? There were prophecies in the Old Testament that said that Elijah must come before the Messiah actually comes. So they ask Jesus about that. But Jesus replies and says that Elijah has already come. And then after that, they realize that he was talking about John the Baptist, who came in the spirit of Elijah. And finally, for today, we read Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. My son, don't forget my teaching. Keep my commands in your heart. They will prolong your life and bring peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on your heart. You'll win favor in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This brings health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing. In ancient Israel, giving the first fruits meant offering the first and best portions of your harvest to God before you knew how the rest would turn out. This was an act of trust that God would provide. Alrighty, we're going to go to the questions for today. But before we do that, a quick word from our wonderful sponsor, Covenant Security Equipment. Covenant Security Equipment is a Christian-owned company that partners with building contractors who build with safety in mind. They sell bullet-resistant windows, secure transaction systems, drive-through installations, and much, much more. You can find all of this at covenantsecurityequipment.com, or you can check out the link in the show notes to go to the website directly. All right, jumping into our questions for today. If you don't have a copy yet of the Learn the Bible in a Year workbook, I highly recommend you pick up a copy. The digital version of the book is totally and 100% free. The link to that is in the show notes. You can also pick up a paperback version, which is what I recommend. So you can put down your answers directly in the workbook. That's what I do. But either one is fine. You can find the link to those in the show notes. All right. Question number 1 for today from Genesis 47, 13 through 31, as well as Genesis 48. Jacob blesses Joseph's sons, crossing his arms to put his right hand on the younger. God often works through the unexpected and overlooked. So here's the question for you. How have you seen God use unlikely circumstances or people in your own life? And question number 2 from what we read in Matthew, Peter confessed Jesus is the Messiah, but then tried to stop him from going to the cross. Here's the question. How do you sometimes accept Jesus as the Savior, but then resist him as Lord? Ooh, that's a juicy question. I like that one. Question number 3 from what we read in Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding is what the verses say. And here's the question. What situation are you trying to figure out through logic rather than trusting God? Goodness gracious, I am very guilty of this sometimes. And that leaves us with question number 4. What is my main takeaway from today? My main takeaway is what we read in Proverbs. I'll read it again here for you. This is a good verse to commit to memory. It's a verse that I memorized as a child, and I constantly remind myself of this during difficult times. And the verses say, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him." Some other versions say, "In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Great verse to commit to memory there. All right, well, that's the end of the recapping questions for today, and I will see all of you lucky dogs here again tomorrow.